I'm still processing what happened today, and I suspect many of you will be too when you hear the full story. What we witnessed in that courtroom wasn't just another Trump outburst. This was something far more dangerous, far more revealing about where we are as a country. According to multiple witnesses in the room, including credentialed journalists and legal observers, Donald Trump literally screamed at the judge, "I am above the law." Now, the exact words may vary slightly depending on which source you consult, but the message was crystal clear, and it should terrify every American who believes in the rule of law. Let me be very clear about what I'm going to do tonight. I'm going to walk you through what happened, step by step. I'm going to explain why this matters so much, and I'm going to connect this to a pattern of behavior that we've been documenting for years now. Because this isn't an isolated incident. This is who Donald Trump has always been. To understand the full weight of what happened today, we need to understand the context. This hearing was supposed to be routine. Trump's legal team had filed yet another motion to dismiss, yet another delay tactic in what has become a familiar playbook. The judge, who has shown remarkable patience throughout these proceedings, was simply ruling on procedural matters, but Trump, as he so often does, couldn't help himself. He couldn't sit quietly while his expensive lawyers did their job. He had to make it about him. He had to turn a legal proceeding into a spectacle. And in doing so, he revealed something that many of us have suspected all along. Donald Trump genuinely believes he is above the law. Now, I know some of you watching might be thinking, come on, this is just Trump being Trump. He says outrageous things all the time. Why should we take this seriously? And that's exactly the attitude that got us here. We've normalized the abnormal. We've become desensitized to behavior that would have ended any other political career decades ago. But let me tell you why today was different. This wasn't a rally. This wasn't a Truth Social post. This wasn't even a press conference where he could walk away without consequences. This was inside a courtroom in front of a federal judge with court reporters documenting every word. This was Trump looking directly at a representative of the American justice system and declaring himself beyond its reach. Let me take you through what actually happened. Based on the accounts we have, the judge was explaining a ruling, speaking in that measured, careful way that judges do. Trump's attorney was standing, presumably about to respond, when Trump suddenly stood up himself. Witnesses say his face was red, his voice was raised to the point of shouting, and he pointed at the judge. "I am above the law." According to several people in the room, he repeated it, not once, but multiple times. "I am above the law. You can't do this to me." The judge, to his credit, immediately called for order. Trump's lawyers were visibly panicked, trying to get their client to sit down, to be quiet, to stop making things worse. But here's what really gets me. After the initial outburst, after his lawyers finally got him seated, Trump sat there with his arms crossed, glaring at the judge. No remorse, no recognition that he had just committed what could be considered contempt of court. Just defiance, pure, unfiltered defiance. The judge, and again, I have to commend this judge for his restraint, took a 10-minute recess. When they returned, the judge issued a stern warning. He said, and I'm paraphrasing here, that the courtroom is a place where the law applies equally to everyone, regardless of their position or past positions they may have held. He said that any further outbursts would result in serious consequences. Now, let's talk about what this really means. When Trump screamed, "I am above the law," he wasn't just having a bad day. He wasn't just frustrated. He was articulating a worldview that he has held his entire life. This is a man who has spent 70-plus years believing that rules don't apply to him, that money and power insulate him from consequences, that he can say anything, do anything, and face no repercussions. And you know what? For most of his life, he's been right. He's dodged creditors, skirted regulations, settled lawsuits, and moved on to the next scheme. He became president despite, or perhaps because of, behavior that would disqualify anyone else. He incited an insurrection and faced no immediate criminal charges. He took classified documents to his golf club and claimed they were his personal property. Every time he's gotten away with something, it has reinforced this belief. Every time the system has failed to hold him accountable, he's become more brazen. And now we're here in a courtroom watching him declare openly what he's always believed privately, that he is above the law. But here's the thing that should concern all of us, regardless of our political affiliation. When someone who has been president of the United States says they are above the law, they're not just talking about themselves. They're making a claim about the nature of power in America. They're saying that if you're wealthy enough, famous enough, powerful enough, the law doesn't apply to you. That's not conservatism. That's not populism. That's authoritarianism. That's the breakdown of the fundamental principle that has held this republic together for nearly 250 years, that no one, absolutely no one, is above the law. Let me put this in historical perspective for a moment. Think about Richard Nixon. Whatever you think about Nixon's policies, whatever you think about Watergate, Nixon at least understood that he was subject to the law. When the Supreme Court ruled against him, he complied. When he faced impeachment, he resigned. He recognized that the institution of the presidency was bigger than any individual president. Think about every other president who has faced legal or ethical scrutiny. They've all, to varying degrees, shown some respect for the judicial process. They've hired lawyers and fought their battles within the system, but they've accepted the premise that they are accountable to that system. Trump is different. Trump has never accepted that premise. And today, he said it out loud in a courtroom to a judge's face. I want to dig deeper into Trump's legal history because I think it helps explain how we got here. This is a man who has been involved in literally thousands of lawsuits over his career. Thousands. He's sued contractors who did work for him and refused to pay them. He's been sued by students at Trump University who said they were defrauded. He's been sued by investors, by former employees, by business partners. And his approach has always been the same. Deny everything, attack the accusers, use legal procedures to delay and obstruct, settle when necessary, but never admit wrongdoing. And always claim that he's the real victim, that everyone is out to get him, that the system is rigged against him. It's a playbook he's been running for decades, and it's worked remarkably well. When you have enough money to hire armies of lawyers, when you can afford to drag cases out for years, when you can use the legal system as a weapon rather than submit to it as a framework for justice, you can get away with a lot. But becoming president changed things. Suddenly, Trump wasn't just a businessman with legal problems. He was a public official, subject to congressional oversight, to special counsels, to a level of scrutiny that even his wealth and his lawyers couldn't completely shield him from. And he hated it. He hated every minute of it. We saw it in his reaction to the Mueller investigation, which he called a witch hunt from day one. We saw it in his impeachments, both of them, where he claimed he did nothing wrong and that his accusers were the ones who should be investigated. We saw it in his response to losing the 2020 election, where he claimed massive fraud despite every court and every recount showing otherwise. Trump has never accepted that the normal rules apply to him, and today's outburst wasn't an aberration. It was the logical culmination of decades of this mindset. Now, I want to talk about Trump's lawyers because their role in all of this is fascinating and deeply troubling. These are supposed to be officers of the court. They have a duty not just to their client, but to the legal system itself. They're supposed to uphold the integrity of the judicial process, but look at what they've been reduced to. They're not practicing law in any meaningful sense. They're running interference. They're filing frivolous motions to delay proceedings. They're making arguments in court that they know have no legal merit, just to buy time. They're managing a client who actively undermines their work at every turn. And the good lawyers, the ones with real reputations to protect, they've mostly abandoned Trump. Look at who's representing him now. Many of them are second-tier attorneys, people willing to hitch their wagon to Trump either for the publicity or because they share his contempt for the system. The top-flight lawyers, the ones from major firms with real institutional standing, they won't touch him. Why? Because Trump is an impossible client. He doesn't listen to legal advice. He can't help himself from making public statements that damage his own case. He attacks judges and prosecutors in ways that make it harder for his lawyers to do their jobs. And perhaps most importantly, he has a history of not paying his legal bills. So we're left with a situation where Trump is represented by lawyers who either can't control him or don't want to. And that brings us back to today's outburst. Where were his lawyers when he stood up and started screaming? They were there trying desperately to get him to sit down, but they couldn't stop him because Trump doesn't respect them any more than he respects the judge or the court or the law itself. Let me talk about the specific case that was being heard today, because the details matter. This isn't some minor civil dispute. This is a case involving serious allegations of fraud, of systematic deception, of using his businesses and his position to enrich himself at the expense of others. The evidence that's been presented over the course of these proceedings is damning. We're talking about financial statements that wildly inflated the value of properties. We're talking about loan applications that contain false information. We're talking about insurance claims based on fraudulent valuations. This isn't a matter of opinion or interpretation. These are facts documented in Trump's own records. And Trump's defense, essentially, that everyone does this, that these are just business practices, that the banks and insurance companies weren't actually harmed, so there's no real crime. It's the same defense he's used his entire career. Everyone cheats a little, so why should I be singled out? But that's not how the law works. You don't get to commit fraud just because you think other people might be doing it too. You don't get to lie on official documents just because you believe the system's corrupt anyway. And you certainly don't get to scream at a judge that you're above the law just because you're angry about being held accountable. The judge in this case has been remarkably patient. He's allowed Trump's lawyers to make their arguments, even when those arguments border on frivolous. He's tolerated Trump's presence in the courtroom, even when it's clearly a publicity stunt. He's given Trump every opportunity to participate in his own defense in a dignified way. And Trump has responded by treating the entire proceeding as a joke, as an inconvenience, as something beneath him, until today, when his frustration boiled over into that explicit declaration, "I'm above the law." I want to talk about what was going through Trump's mind in that moment, because I think it's revealing. Trump has spent his entire life surrounded by people who tell him what he wants to hear. He's fired anyone who challenged him, who told him no, who suggested that maybe he should follow the rules like everyone else. He's built an entire ecosystem around himself where he is always right, where his instincts are always correct, where any criticism is just jealousy or hatred or part of some conspiracy against him. And that ecosystem has insulated him from reality in profound ways. So when he walks into that courtroom and sees a judge who won't defer to him, who treats him like any other defendant, who actually expects him to follow courtroom procedures and respect the judicial process, it's genuinely shocking to him. How dare this judge, this civil servant, presume to have authority over Donald Trump? That's what was behind today's outburst. It wasn't just anger. It was genuine bewilderment that the system wasn't bending to his will. It was disbelief that he was actually being held accountable. And it was a desperate assertion of what he truly believes, that he is different, that he is special, that the rules that govern ordinary people don't apply to him. Now let's talk about the broader pattern here, because today's incident doesn't exist in isolation. Trump has been attacking the judicial system for years now. He's called judges who rule against him biased, corrupt, appointed by his enemies. He's attacked the integrity of the courts themselves, claiming they're rigged, that justice in America is a two-tiered system designed to protect Democrats and punish Republicans. And here's the really insidious part. By constantly attacking the courts, by undermining public confidence in the judicial system, Trump is making it harder for judges to do their jobs. If a judge rules against Trump, his supporters immediately assume it's political. If a judge holds Trump accountable, they're accused of being part of the deep state. This is a classic authoritarian tactic. You attack the institutions of democracy, you undermine public faith and shared sources of truth and authority, and you create a situation where your followers only believe you. Everyone else is lying. Everyone else is corrupt. Everyone else is part of the conspiracy. Only you are telling the truth. And it's working. We see it in polling. A huge percentage of Republicans now say they don't trust the courts. Don't trust the FBI. Don't trust the Department of Justice. Not because these institutions have actually become more corrupt or more biased, but because Trump has spent years telling them they are. This is devastating for our democracy. Courts only work if people accept their legitimacy. Laws only work if people believe they'll be enforced fairly. The entire system depends on a shared acceptance that these institutions, while imperfect, are operating in good faith according to established rules. Trump is destroying that shared acceptance. And today's outburst, his declaration that he is above the law, is the logical endpoint of this campaign of institutional destruction. Let me connect this to something broader, something that goes beyond Trump himself. We're living through a crisis of democratic governance around the world. In country after country, we're seeing the rise of leaders who claim to speak for the people while actually undermining democratic institutions. They attack the press, they attack the courts, they attack any institution that might serve as a check on their power. And they all use the same playbook. They claim the system is rigged. They claim they're the only ones who can fix it. They claim that normal rules and procedures are just obstacles preventing them from delivering for their supporters. They promise strength, decisiveness, action unconstrained by bureaucracy or legal niceties. Trump fits this pattern perfectly. He's not an aberration. He's part of a global trend toward authoritarianism, toward strongman politics, toward the erosion of democratic norms and institutions. And here's what makes it so dangerous in the American context. We have a system of checks and balances that depends on good faith participation. The president can't actually be a king because Congress can check presidential power, because courts can strike down illegal actions, because the press can expose wrongdoing, because voters can hold leaders accountable. But all of those checks only work if people in positions of power accept their legitimacy. If a president simply ignores court orders, if he pardons anyone who helps him break the law, if he uses the powers of his office to punish enemies and reward friends, if he refuses to accept election results that go against him, then the whole system starts to break down. We saw glimpses of this during Trump's first term. We saw it most dramatically on January 6th, when Trump refused to accept his election loss and incited a mob to stop the peaceful transfer of power. But we're seeing it again now in these courtrooms where Trump is openly declaring that he believes he is above the law. If Trump wins the presidency again, what's to stop him from acting on that belief? What's to stop him from ordering the Department of Justice to drop all cases against him? What's to stop him from pardoning himself or from simply refusing to comply with court orders he doesn't like? What's to stop him from using the powers of the presidency to go after his enemies while protecting his allies? The answer is not much. The system depends on norms, on shared understandings, on a basic commitment to democratic principles, and Trump has shown us again and again that he doesn't share that commitment. I want to talk about Trump supporters for a moment because I think it's important to understand why they continue to back him despite all of this. And I want to be fair here. I don't think most Trump supporters are authoritarians. I don't think they actually want to destroy American democracy. What they want is someone who will fight for them. They're frustrated with a system that seems to work for elites but not for ordinary people. They're angry about economic stagnation, about cultural changes they didn't ask for, about feeling left behind by globalization and technological change. They see Trump as someone who understands their frustrations and who's willing to break some rules to fight on their behalf. And I get that. I really do. The system isn't working for a lot of people. Wages have been stagnant for decades while the cost of housing, healthcare, and education has skyrocketed. Good jobs have disappeared. Communities have been hollowed out. People feel like their concerns are ignored by political and cultural elites who look down on them. But here's the problem. Trump isn't actually fighting for those people. He's fighting for himself. He's using their legitimate grievances as a shield against accountability. He's telling them that anyone who holds him responsible is really attacking them. He's conflating criticism of his behavior with contempt for his supporters. And that's a dangerous lie. You can care about working class Americans and still believe that no one, including a former president, should be above the law. You can want to shake up the system and still believe in the rule of law. You can be frustrated with elites and still recognize that Trump's declaration today was wrong and dangerous. The tragedy is that Trump has convinced so many people that they have to choose. Either you support him unconditionally or you're part of the corrupt establishment that's trying to keep them down. There's no middle ground in Trump's world. You're either with him or against him. But that's not true. We can want reform, want change, want a system that works better for ordinary Americans, and still insist on basic standards of conduct for our leaders. We can acknowledge that the system has problems without embracing someone who wants to be above the law. Let me talk about what happens next, because I think the next few months are going to be critical for our democracy. Trump is facing multiple legal cases. Some are criminal, some are civil, some are in state court, some are in federal court. And in every single one of them, he's using the same tactics: delay, obstruct, attack, and claim victimhood. Today's outburst might actually have consequences. The judge could hold Trump in contempt. He could impose fines. In theory, he could even order Trump jailed, though the practical and political complications of jailing a former president and current presidential candidate are immense. My guess is that the judge will issue another stern warning, maybe impose some fines, but will stop short of more serious sanctions. Not because Trump doesn't deserve them, but because judges are aware of the bigger picture. They know that any significant punishment will be portrayed as political persecution. They know that Trump supporters will rally around him. They know that they'll be accused of interfering in the election. This is the bind our system is in. Trump's behavior demands consequences, but imposing those consequences creates its own set of problems. And Trump knows this. He's banking on it. He's daring judges to hold him accountable, knowing that the act of holding him accountable will serve his political purposes. It's a form of legal terrorism, if you will. Trump is holding the system hostage. Do what I want, or I'll blow everything up. Hold me accountable, and I'll unleash my supporters. Try to enforce the law, and I'll claim you're destroying democracy. And the really scary thing is, it might work. We might end up in a situation where Trump is effectively above the law because the political costs of holding him accountable are simply too high, where judges and prosecutors decide that the damage of letting him go is less than the damage of trying to stop him. If that happens, if Trump skates on all of these cases and wins the presidency again, it will be a dark day for American democracy, because it will establish once and for all that if you're powerful enough, famous enough, ruthless enough, you really can put yourself above the law. I want to talk about the role of the media in all of this because, frankly, we failed in some important ways. We've covered Trump extensively, exhaustively, constantly, but have we communicated to the American people just how dangerous he is? Have we made clear what's at stake? Too often, we've treated Trump as just another political story. Horse race coverage, who's up, who's down in the polls. What's his latest outrageous statement? How are Republicans reacting? It's all very process-oriented, very inside baseball. But what we should be doing is explaining over and over in clear terms why someone who believes they're above the law cannot be trusted with power. Why today's outburst isn't just embarrassing or inappropriate, but genuinely disqualifying. And we need to do this without falling into false equivalence. This isn't a both sides situation. Democrats have their flaws, their scandals, their problems. But we don't have a Democratic leader screaming at judges that they're above the law. We don't have Democratic officials claiming that election results should be overturned. We don't have a Democratic movement built around the idea that institutions should be torn down rather than reformed. The threat right now is specific. It has a name, it has a face, and those of us in the media need to be clear about that, even if it makes us uncomfortable, even if it opens us up to accusations of bias. Because here's the thing, being even-handed doesn't mean treating all situations as equivalent. Sometimes one side really is more dangerous than the other. Sometimes one leader really does pose a unique threat, and when that's the case, journalism demands that we say so clearly. I think about what history will say about this moment. Future generations will look back and ask, how did this happen? How did America come so close to re-electing someone who openly declared himself above the law? How did our institutions prove so fragile? How did so many people go along with it? And I think the answer will be because we got complacent. because we thought our democracy was more resilient than it actually is. Because we underestimated the appeal of authoritarianism when it's wrapped in populist rhetoric. Because we failed to defend our institutions when they needed defending. There's a poem that keeps coming to mind. It's about how democracies die, not with a bang, but with a whimper. Not through violent revolution, but through a gradual erosion of norms, a slow acceptance of unacceptable behavior, a progressive normalization of authoritarianism. That's where we are. We're watching it happen in real time. And today was another step in that process. Trump screamed that he's above the law. Some people were shocked. Some people defended him. Many people shrugged and said, that's just Trump being Trump. And each of those reactions, in its own way, represents a failure to grasp the gravity of the moment. Let me talk about what I think we should do. And I say we because this isn't just about politicians or judges or lawyers. This is about all of us. This is about whether we, as a people, are going to defend our democracy or whether we're going to let it slip away. First, we need to take this seriously. We need to stop normalizing Trump's behavior. We need to stop treating his contempt for the law as just another political position. When someone tells you who they are, believe them. Trump has told us he's above the law. That's disqualifying. Full stop. Second, we need to support the institutions that are trying to hold the line. That means supporting judges who stand up to intimidation. It means supporting prosecutors who are doing their jobs despite political pressure. It means supporting journalists who are documenting what's happening. It means supporting the rule of law even when it's difficult. Third, we need to have conversations. We need to talk to friends, family, neighbors, especially those who support Trump. Not to attack them, not to call them names, but to genuinely engage with why they support him and to explain why this matters. Democracy dies when people stop talking to each other, when we retreat into our bubbles and stop trying to persuade. Fourth, we need to vote. This is the most fundamental way we can defend democracy. If you believe that no one should be above the law, that belief needs to translate into action at the ballot box. Because ultimately, elections are how democracies hold leaders accountable. And fifth, we need to think long term. Even if Trump loses, even if he faces legal consequences, the movement he represents isn't going away. There will be other would-be authoritarians. There will be other leaders who claim to be above the law. We need to think about how to strengthen our institutions, how to make our democracy more resilient, how to address the underlying grievances that make authoritarianism appealing. I know this is heavy. I know it's a lot to process. And I know some of you are probably thinking I'm being alarmist, that I'm exaggerating the danger. But I genuinely don't think I am. I think we're living through one of the most dangerous moments in American history. And I think future generations will judge us based on how we respond. Trump screamed at a judge today that he's above the law. That statement should end his political career. It should be absolutely disqualifying. The fact that it probably won't be, the fact that he'll likely spin this into a fundraising appeal and his supporters will rally around him, tells you everything you need to know about where we are as a country. We're at a crossroads. We can choose to defend the rule of law, to insist that our leaders are accountable, to maintain the institutions that protect democracy, or we can shrug, accept that some people really are above the law, and slide into something darker. I know which path I'm choosing. I hope you'll join me.